It is said that at the White Horse and Griffin Hotel there is a ghostly white horse with a rider haunting the old Coach Inn tunnel. According to the story, the ghost rider is a murderer whose spirit is condemned to relive the terrible events of the night at the end of the 19th century. There was also a ghost of a previous landlady called Mrs. Bowler, who died on the back steps of the inn at the end of the 19th century. One night, after clearing the inn of customers, she was taking out the empties. She made her way down the steps at the back of the inn, tumbled on the slippery step, and fell, cracking her head wide open on the steps. With no one around, her screams went unheard, and she bled to death. In the 1980s, there was even an offer of a £50 reward to any person who stayed in one of the rooms and stayed until the morning. The reward was never claimed, as no one stayed throughout the night. The inn was originally built in about 1691, and with its long history, it's not surprising to learn it has seen many ghost sightings by guests and staff alike. It was the first coaching inn from Whitby to York and London, and it operated as an inn until 1939. Maggie was an old witch, often referred to as Mad Maggie, and she had a reputation around Whitby which left her feared by many. She lived by the church steps, and children would flee if they ever saw her outside her home. Even the seamen were frightened of her, for she claimed to have the power to know when somebody would die at sea. Mad Maggie did have one prophecy that came true. She promised that when she died, the greatest storm ever would rage in the North Sea and kill many sailors and fishermen. True to her word, the day she died, there was an eerie calm over the sea. Even the Whitby gulls were nowhere to be seen. News spread of her death, and soon after, a massive storm wreaked havoc, killing many seamen and fishermen, and leaving many women widowed. What many people don't realise is that the platforms they sit on going up the steps were not intended to hold the living. Pallbearers, when they needed a break while carrying the dead to the church, would place the coffins on the planks while they rested. In St Mary's churchyard is said to be the grave of Humpty Dumpty. It is shaped like an egg on a horizontal view, but Humpty Dumpty was actually a cannon that was sat on top of the defence wall. During battle, the wall was blown up and the cannon came crashing down. Maybe Whitby is home to the famous fable and the wall that carried the cannon. In a time when oysters were a quick meal for the poor, a scruffy gent known as the Oyster Man would do his rounds and sell his latest catch to punters in the pubs. He would stagger around with a heavy oyster sack on his back yelling, "Oysters alive ho!" and people would come out to buy their oysters for the dinner. One evening he entered the Golden Lion pub that was on his route. He got into a fight, and in self-defence the oysterman pulled out a knife and stabbed a man called John Smith, killing him. He lived with the guilt for the rest of his life. At night you can still hear the oysterman with his call, "Oysters alive-o!" as his ghostly remains walk the streets of Whitby.